In this one, I'm going to show you intercooler charge piping and a couple other little fiddly bits and bobs, and really that's the last major fabrication before we start going into final assembly and, you know, doing things like this, you know, set that there, this goes here, because there are a number of small things that have to happen, but they're not going to be big. There's not going to be a lot of obvious changes to the truck as they happen, so I'll do my best to try and keep it interesting for you. But here we go. So our first task here is going to be to make an adapter going between the hull set and the Banks turbo. And I made a transfer pipe, but I had to make an actual output flange for the hull set because it uses a strange type of flange. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's not a standard V-band. So I was like, okay, no big deal. I'll just get a block of aluminum and take it over to my buddy's shop, chuck it up here in a 4-jaw. And if you've never seen this done, it's pretty simple. You have some X lines on the block there, and then you have your 4 jaws, and you line it up against the center. You can use a drill bit or an actual live center like I'm using here, and then you squeeze the jaws down into it, and once it spins and that center point doesn't move that much, you're good to start chopping on it. And for those of you that are, you know, actual machinists, you might have noticed that I'm taking a series of very light cuts here. And that's correct. The reason I'm doing that is because this machine, it's an old South Bend lathe, is kind of tired, kind of clapped out. It's got a lot of backlash on it. And also, as you cut heavily, it starts to vibrate and it works the ways loose. And so the way I found to actually get reasonably accurate cuts and decent work production out of it is to go as fast as you can spin the machine and then just take a series of really light cuts, and you can actually move a lot of material pretty quickly. I've got it set up before to where it was steady and really nice, and you could take like reasonable cuts like 20-30 thou on steel. But what was happening there is that it would take longer to make a few big cuts than it would to just take like 20 or 30 at 3 to 4 thou. And that's a very pretty inside done, but as you can see, I get to this point and I go, geez, I really need something like a left-handed boring bar. But hey, look at that. Isn't that pretty? That's pretty. Oh well. Pretty is as pretty does, as they say, and it turns out pretty does not much in this case. I didn't take a clamp over there with me, and I just cut it to match the flange that's there, and it turns out that the V-bands that I use take a different clamp than the flange that it has, and this is a long-winded way of saying, God dang it, now I gotta make a whole different thing. Okay, no sweat, I'll just figure that out. So I tried like a couple of different things. I thought maybe if I can just squeeze a 2 1/4 inch on it and that lines up with the outside, it'll be okay. but it's not. That hole set flange is a problem. So I have to figure out a way to make these 2-inch V-bands fit in the same package as that adapter and the original one. Watch me now, I can totally do this. Now, the last time you saw me make an adapter cone between a small thing and a big thing that's both round, you saw me do it over at a nice, well-equipped shop. Well, here we are in my not very nice, sort of poorly equipped shop. First, look up this thing here on the old interwebs. We have a supercomputer in our pockets at all times, so definitely take advantage of that. The other part here is you'll notice I'm working in metric, and that is a thing I'm going to be doing more and more, especially for layout and stuff, because working in an actual base 10 system is really handy for geometry, as opposed to trying to convert fractions to decimals and back and forth. Why not just use something that's already in decimals, you know? That's my vibe. And this little bit here is something I picked up from, well, watching other YouTube videos, namely one by Ron Koval, where he talks about how to form a sheet metal cone, and he was using heavy metal, but still, the point is, if you're trying to weld this, it's a problem. But you can use something like a pipe, or in this case a spare V-band, and force it together, and now, when you go to tack it, it's not trying to spring apart, and you have effectively an extra hand, and it forces it all into alignment as you see here. After that, you can really work it into the final shape you want. But I really appreciated this tip, and I hope you do too. We're going to whip up another little batch of hand-rubbed anti-seize here, and then we're going to check final dimensions and see how we did. I was shooting for an overall height of 30 millimeters with a transition of 20 millimeters between the large and small ends. And as you can see, we got, well, yeah, it's pretty close to 30 mil. And so, yeah, don't be shy about making stuff yourself if you can't just go find and buy it. Now, we have to address this problem here, which is our 90-degree elbows kind of sort of don't fit in the hole they need. So what I find to make a good cut on this stuff, because you can't really buy a hose cutter that's this size, just stick it on a spare chunk of tube and give it a roll and make several light passes, you know, following your lines, and you will have a relatively straight, reasonably done cut at the end of it. And as per usual, there are some lessons learned. Namely, with this model of saw, you can watch the handle backs off as you make cuts when you have a light amount of tension, so be aware of that. And when it comes time to actually fitting up a long series of tubes and joints and stuff, you can wrestle it and you can sort of goddammer it, Or you can do the smart thing, which is what I figured out later and remembered from other instructions here, is you take a bit of tape and you hold the joint in place, and then you just pop your tape open like this, make your tack, and then move your tacks around as you move your tape. Boom, job done. And you will come up with, well, not the best welds, but boy howdy, we got intercooler piping, we got a transfer pipe, we have some premium Shinesium AN fittings to set up our oil drain for the secondary turbo. We have, other stuff going on. Check it out. I got an oil distribution block. We have an adapter for pipe thread to banjo bolt. We have a painted intake. We have another painted intake. Nope, same one. And look at all this stuff we've got crossed off the list. We're doing pretty good, except not in focus, but we're doing pretty good, and we will continue to do pretty good. I think, probably, maybe. Subscribe? I don't know.